Just a program reminder. Make sure you're listening to all the talk show hosts from morning till night. Tomorrow, Howard will be giving away a family 4-pack to a future Wild Things game. They're great seats because they're mine. And then Rick will be giving away a pair, I think it's for Thursday's game, when the Florence Yawls, that's right, Yawls, that's their nickname out of Florence, Kentucky, will be facing the Wild Things. It's easy for me to remind myself about this guy because he's got great initials. J-O-B, Job. Jim O'Brien, how are you?
I'm fine. I wanted to start off by telling you that I was in Wheeling over the weekend. I had visited our older daughter, in Columbus, and then on Saturday we stopped on the way home to Pittsburgh at the Mount Calvary Cemetery in Wheeling, next to Wheeling Park, where every member of my family that I grew up with in my home, every one of them is there. And, of course, it was the day before Father's Day, so I thought I should stop and wish my father well, and, of course, my mother, my brothers and sister and nephews and everything, grandparents, they're all buried in Mount Calvary. And so I was right in your neck of the woods down there.
All right, okay. I got a lot of things to talk about, so I might have to go overtime with you and take a couple of breaks, so make sure we get the commercials in. Okay, item number 1. It's a big topic all around the country today with the idea of the NCAA doing this, not allowed to do that. I'm going to ask you, since you spent a number of years in Pittsburgh, especially at the University of Pittsburgh, as a sports information director, and I always like you because I did a news service for Pitt, and you made sure you put steak and potatoes on my table every week.
I'm glad you remembered, Bill.
Yep,
you did a good job for us. You were worth it.
We got the word out to everybody, Even stations I had in West Virginia would take my Pitt updates. So it was cool, I got to ask you, you've been around college sports almost all your life. You still follow it. Is it time that we start paying the athletes?
I know you feel that way, but I don't. And I remember you have a disclaimer at the start of your show that the opinions expressed on your show are strictly yours. You're like Jim Cramer on CNBC on television. My opinions are strictly my own opinions. I worked at the University of Pittsburgh, and I was a student there. That's how I got my start in being a legitimate sports writer. And I've always, I had a half scholarship for 3.5 years. I came to Pitt with a half scholarship, a senatorial scholarship, and then when I became the sports editor going into my sophomore year, I was the first non-senior sports editor of the student newspaper, which came out twice a week. So for the next 3 years, I had 2 halves, and even though I wasn't a strong student in math, I do know that 2 halves equal 1 full. Now, in those days, the student newspaper also had 1 seat on the chartered airplane when the Pitt basketball team or football team traveled, okay? They haven't had that for years. The student sports editor and the student editors no longer get any scholarship. They haven't gotten them in years. So that's a backward step. And I always felt, I've donated to the University of Pittsburgh for 40-some years, continue to do so. So in my mind, I tried to pay back what they had given me in the way of a scholarship when I was there. And I think, they like to use this phrase, it starts with the NCAA, and all the athletic directors like to use the phrase student athlete, when in many cases it's a farce. It's a farce. They either have cupcake courses, they were on virtual education before the pandemic, and so few of them really sincerely apply themselves to the academic side of being in college. So I think that athletes have already been paid to play sports, and that is they've been paid. Most of us, like my granddaughter's about to go to college in a year. She has a perfect score on her ACT, and we'll see what kind of money anybody offers her to go to college. You know, some of the colleges today cost $50,000 to $80,000 a year in tuition. So if you're at one of those schools and you don't have to pay that, and you don't have to pay for your dorm, and I'll tell you something else that's often overlooked. You know, athletic directors like to boast about the fact that the student athletes have a better GPA than the student enrollment at large. Well, that's because they include the tennis players and the volleyball players and the kids who actually are there to go to school. And it's also students who are in athletics should fare better academically than their normal student body. And I'll tell you why. They don't have to worry about where they're going to get the money to pay for tuition. They don't have to pay for their meals. And they get tutoring on a daily basis. Most of the sports teams, when they travel with 2 or 3 mentors they have a whole staff, upwards of a dozen people, who tutor these athletes to make sure that they make some attempt at keeping up with their grades and so forth. So I think they already get paid. And Bill, I would rather see colleges drop sports altogether rather than to pay the athletes. Now, at the same time, the NCAA and these schools have created their own monster, because you take Nick Saban, for instance, at Alabama. You know, he just got an extension on his contract. And he's making now about $10 million a year. And my feeling is, if you're a coach of basketball or football and you want to make that kind of money, to me, you should have to be in professional basketball, not on a college campus. I think that's ridiculous. And so the schools have only themselves to blame, because people say, well, look what the coach is making. You know, Krzyzewski is about to retire after this coming season at Duke. And all things considered, he makes upwards of $10 million a year as well. So he doesn't have to worry about where he's going to find his money when he's retired, because he also, at the same time, I'm sure, was participating in a 401k program, or whatever they call it on the college level. It's different than it is in corporations. He won't have to worry, you know, because they probably matched 8% of his salary and then some. So I'm against paying athletes. And I'll tell you something else, Bill. The idea that they've just given athletes in college the ability going forward to sell things with their own name on it, jerseys and so forth, I think that's a non-issue, because there isn't that kind of demand for most athletes' jerseys and names and so forth. There just isn't that demand. And the other factor is, colleges, for the most part, don't make a lot of money on sports. You know why? Because as fast as they make it, kind of like the young Bill DeFabio, as fast as they make it, they spend it.
Oh, that's another commentary. Okay, how about this? Lola, you can chime in on it. We talked about this. Remember the Fab Five in Michigan?
Yes.
They sold a lot of jerseys with the names and everything, all right? But yet those kids a booster couldn't even buy them a pizza. Shouldn't the athletes have something as a perk?
Well, first of all, I'm sure that most of their boosters bought the more than pizzas. But by the rules, they weren't allowed to. You know, John Wooden had a reputation for being lily white and almost in sainthood, and he was the best college basketball coach at his time. But there were people associated with the program who were taking care financially of the likes of Lou Alcindor and others. And that was going on at a lot of schools. A lot of athletes, whether they were at West Virginia University, the University of Pittsburgh, and probably even Steubenville College and Wheeling College, some alumni were taking care of them.
Well, okay.
So it's always going on under the table, kind of the way restaurants have to pay help if they're going to keep it these days. They don't want to be on the tax rules.
Speaking of restaurants, I want to go off base a little bit. I'm really going to miss the Carlton House.
Well, Kevin Joyce was there for 10 years, and he did a great job.
Yep.
I only was there on maybe 2 or 3 occasions. One of them was for when they had a reunion party for my former Pitt classmate, Paul Martha, an All-American running back who later played 7 seasons in the NFL, 6 with the Steelers and 1 with the Denver Broncos.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul, by the way, he's having a very difficult time these days.
I understand, yeah. Great ball player. Wasn't he involved with the USFL?
Yes, he was. And he worked for Mr. DeBartolo
Yep.
with the Penguins and with the USFL and so forth. Paul was a sharp guy. Paul
Yes,
was good looking and a brain, and we thought he had a big edge on the rest of us when it came to getting a good date.
Yep. By the way, Mr. DeBartolo owes me about $1,500 when I worked for him in the Maulers. Would you go to Youngstown and demand that he gives me my money?
Well, Mr. DeBartolo is deceased, but his son, Eddie DeBartolo Jr., and I are supposed to go visit Paul Martha.
Oh, okay.
In about another month or so. He's out on, the son is lives most of the time these days out on a ranch out in Colorado. And I communicate with him because he's a good egg, and he's gotten himself in trouble through the years when it came to money and
whatever.
So
well,
everybody's hot for the buck.
Yeah.
No matter whether, I'd rather, we have a school here in Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon University, and their sports programs are, Division III or something along those lines, and they don't have scholarships for most of their sports, and I just as soon see the schools go back to having intramural sports than I would to having them pay ball players.
Yeah. Well, forget about the money that they owe me from the Maulers because Bill Keenest was the, what was he back then?
He was probably the public relations guy.
Yeah, because he came from Washington, D.C., where they won a Super Bowl because he used to brag about his ring. He knew that they owed me money, so he said, you know what, meet me at the equipment office or whatever. So I went home with Mauler helmets, jerseys and stuff. So more than this $1,600 they owe me. And if you want to buy Glenn Carano's helmet from me, Jim, I'll give you a discount, $2,000.
I'd rather get one for Cliff Stott for the Maulers.
Yeah.
Or what was it? He was with the Birmingham.
Yeah, we had a Weep for Stout because the station I worked at was Weep.
Yeah.
W-E-E-P, so we Weep for Stout.
We have that in common, too, because I used to be, before I went to Miami in 1969, I used to have a daily radio show in Pittsburgh on Weep Radio.
Yep.
And WTAE came along and wanted to talk to me about working there, doing sports commentaries in the morning. And then one day at a party, one of my friends, Myron Cope, came up to me and said, hey, listen, I don't want to have any hard feelings, but WTAE is talking to me about that job, and I need it. And WTAE made the right choice.
Yes, they
chose
did.
Myron Cope. Hey, Bill, you don't have to agree with me. They took Myron Cope, and the rest is history. And Myron Cope was just
iconic,
a natural for that particular position.
Yeah.
And Jim O'Brien did okay after that.
Yeah, you've done all right, especially with all of your great publications. Yeah, I worked for Weep, and then I worked for another oddball call letters, WASP, WASP in Brownsville.
Well, Bill, one thing about you should have the initials JOB because you've always stayed on somebody's payroll, and I admire and respect that. You hustled.
Yep, well, I had to hustle.
You've been on a lot of radio stations where you've had to go out and get advertising, so
Yep, did a great job. Well, your buddy helped me a lot, too, Joe Gordon.
Well, he's a good man. He was one of the best public relations directors in all of sports, and we all benefited from being associated with the Steelers and with Joe Gordon.
All right, I got a couple of other subjects to go to. I want to talk ABA with you because when I think of the Brooklyn Nets, I think of you because you covered the Nets when they were in the ABA, right? That's for another segment coming up after we take a break. Muhammad Ali's son is going to step into the ring. You think he'll have most of the genes from his old man?
No.
Okay.
He'd have a tough time fighting his sister. Or so would I.
Oh, that's right. She's pretty good, isn't she?
I don't think she boxes anymore, but
she was real good at one time.
She was good. She was good looking, and she was a pretty fair boxer.
Yeah.
But most sons of great athletes have a difficult time because, I'm sitting here right now talking to you, and I can see about 4 or 5 images of Muhammad Ali, some of Joe Frazier, and I got the nicest Father's Day gift from the younger of my 2 daughters, from my Rebecca O'Brien, who's visiting me from California for the first time in a year and a half because of the pandemic shutdown. And she surprised me on Father's Day. It's one of the best Father's Day gifts I've ever gotten. She took a picture on television from a documentary about the fight of the century between Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali back in 1971 at Madison Square Garden for the heavyweight championship of the world. And they had a documentary on TV, and she took a picture of me at ringside at that fight, and she had it framed, and she gave it to me, and she wrote on the back of it that it was to the father of the century.
Ooh.
Can't do better than that.
Wow, that's great.
So we're putting that up on my wall of fame, where we have pictures of Joe DiMaggio and Babe Ruth and some of the great people that I've been fortunate to
That's
know.
right. You were ringside for that big fight, right?
I'm one of 2 people still alive. Bob Lipsyte of New York Times was one of the only other one that's still alive, and the 2 fighters, the referee Arthur McContie, the ringside announcer Johnny Addy, and they're all gone. They're all gone, and this picture that my daughter gave me, I'm seated at ringside, and behind me, directly behind me, is from Bonanza, Lorne
Green.
Green.
The Canadian, yeah.
Lorne Green, the movie actor. He was one of about 200 to 300 major TV and movie and entertainment celebrities who were at that fight at Madison Square Garden. It's the biggest sports event that I've ever covered.
Yeah. Well, wait a second. You were there when Willis Reed hopped on the hardwood, limping in the 70 NBA championships, didn't he?
He pushed off my shoulder.
Yeah. Well, that's a classic.
Number 2.
That's a
number
classic.
2. That's number 2. And number 3 was when I returned to Pittsburgh after 1 year in Miami and 9 years in New York. When I returned to Pittsburgh in 1979, my timing was perfect because the Pirates, you won't believe this story. I know Lola doesn't believe it. The Pittsburgh Pirates won the World Series that year, and then I covered the Steelers when they won their 4th Super Bowl in a 6-year period. So my timing to come back home was really right on.
Yeah, all right, that's cool. That's cool. I went over that Willis Reed video many times when you told me about it about a year ago, and yeah, I see that hand on your shoulder, man.
Yeah, and Willis Reed. I mean, that was what a team that was to cover. I mean, so many great players, and you mentioned about the ABA. One of my nicknames was Mr. ABA because I wrote about the ABA for the Sporting News and the NBA for a 9-year period, and I was with my granddaughter at a basketball game at a gym in Columbus last week, and there was a tournament going on, and there were basketball junkies everywhere, and there were coaches and college coaches and everything else. And I said to my granddaughter, I said to my granddaughter, how do you think it feels to be in a gym and know that you know more about basketball than anybody else in the gym?
Yeah.
And I introduced myself to some of the people at her school, her basketball coach. I was happy to hear that he's an English teacher. I always liked combinations like that. And that's what school's supposed to be about. You're supposed to have a coach who's also a teacher. That's Dr. Naismith, who invented the game of basketball. I mean, he was at a YMCA in Springfield, Massachusetts. So they combined. They had to teach and they had a coach.
Yeah. You probably remember Dr. J in the ABA, right?
Well, I heard Stephen A. Smith, one of your idols, on TV a couple weeks ago, and I get a kick out of Stephen A. Smith. I mean, he's got a shtick,
Yes,
and he's so darn authoritative. He makes $10 million. You talk about getting paid. He makes $10 million to voice his opinions about sports. Just a little above your pay grade.
Oh.
And the thing is that he's on there one day, and he's got Dick Vitale and Max Kellerman, and Vitale's in between them on the screen. And he bullied, as he often does, Vitale, into agreeing with him that Pearl Washington from Syracuse University
I remember the Pearl.
was the greatest show ever in basketball. And I'm listening to this, and I'm saying to myself, he isn't even the greatest show named Pearl in basketball. Earl the Pearl Monroe.
Oh, Baltimore Bullets.
The Bullets was a much better show on a much bigger level. Plus, you mentioned Dr. J. What a show he was. But I'll tell you who was the greatest show, to me, my opinion.
Okay, hurry up. We got to take a break.
Pete Maravich.
I agree with you. Number 44.
Yeah, there's an hour and a half documentary that I am in talking about Pete Maravich. Yeah. I saw him score 68 points in New Orleans against the Knicks and against Walt Frazier and Earl Monroe, two of the best defensive guards in the league. 68 points. No three-pointer.
No.
He was the best show. All you got to do is watch that documentary on Pistol Pete. And he had Western Pennsylvania roots. His father was the coach at in the Aliquippa Ambridge area.
Yes, he was.
And Pete was actually born in the same hospital in Aliquippa where Tony Dorsett would later be born. So that's a pretty good pedigree for that hospital.
Not bad. Let's take a break, Jim, okay?
All right.
Take a break, grab a cup of coffee, and we'll be back with you in about 5 minutes.
Very good.
J.O.B. on the air. Boy, he should write another book. Yep, and I'd read it too, because they're all good. We'll be right back.
The Metro News Update is brought to you by Thomas Auto Centers, Mall Road, St. Clairsville. Get the best deal at Thomas Auto Centers.
West Virginia Metro News. I'm Chris Lawrence. Governor Jim Justice's indoor mask mandate came to an end on Sunday in West Virginia. Now, the governor says individual businesses can still require that their patrons wear a mask. The governor's next media briefing on the coronavirus is tomorrow. The governor announced the first winners in the Do It for Baby Dogs sweepstakes, where the top prize was $1 million for those West Virginians who have been vaccinated. And that prize on Sunday went to Karen Foley of Mineral Wells.
I have lots of new friends and lots of haters.
Ralph Paul of Parkersburg won a custom-fitted truck and says that's not why he got the shot.
My wife and I, we felt very fortunate to be able to be vaccinated early in February, and I got our second shot in March. And we felt like doing that just gave us freedom.
Another drawing set for next week. A 10-year-old boy is dead and another juvenile hurt following a weekend ATV crash in Clay County. That happened Sunday evening in the area of Bird Hollow. The young victim is from the Lismores community and was dead on arrival at Montgomery General Hospital. A female juvenile who was a passenger is at CAMC with serious injuries. The pair traveling on a paved road, according to state police, and lost control on a curve, striking a wall. In Mason County, state police reported another deadly ATV crash, this one also Sunday evening in the community of Leon. No other information was released there. You're listening to Metro News, the voice of West Virginia. Wednesday will mark 5 years since the devastating flood in West Virginia of 2016. And Gary Johnson, the mayor of Richwood, says there's optimism about the future in his town.
Overall, I think looking to the future, that we have a bright future here in Richwood.
The flood had wiped out a large part of the town, but they have bounced back, and Johnson believes more good things are ahead as they start to focus on the tourism-based economy as a gateway town to the Monongahela National Forest. From the Metro News Anchor Desk, I'm Chris Lawrence.
AutomotiveMap.com presents the Sports Flash, powered by The Score on The Watchdog. I'm John Thayer. The Atlanta Hawks are headed to the Eastern Conference Finals for just the second time in the last 50 years after beating the 76ers yesterday 103-96. Trae Young had 21 points and 10 assists, while Kevin Huerter with 27 points in the victory. The Hawks will now take on the Milwaukee Bucks. That series gets underway on Wednesday. In Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals, it was the Phoenix Suns defeating the LA Clippers 120-114. Devin Booker with 40 points, 13 rebounds, and 11 assists in the victory for Phoenix. Game 2 is tomorrow night. In the NHL, it was the Golden Knights beating the Canadiens 2-1 in overtime yesterday. That series is all square at 2. Tonight, the Lightning host the Islanders in Game 5. Download the Score app today. Lightning Fast Sports Alerts, so you never miss a thing. I'm John Thayer with the Sports Flash, powered by the Score on the Watchdog.
O'Reilly Auto Parts is here to keep your car on the road with the right parts, advice from our parts professionals, and our free loaner tool program. Your local store has more than 80 specialty tools available for your next repair. Refundable deposit required. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts and ask about our free loaner tool program or visit O'ReillyAuto.com.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
To remind pet owners that Progressive covers pets on our auto policy at no extra charge, we're making a really cute pet-themed radio commercial. You gotta see this dog. It's a little puffball. It looks like a piece of cotton candy that I could just eat up. Oh, and it waddles when it walks. He's a little ducky dog. Oh, I wish you could see it. We really should have planned this better.
Get coverage for your pets with an auto policy from Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Coverage for cats and dogs included with the purchase of collision coverage and is subject to policy terms.
Over the years, you've brought opioids into your home. They helped when you were in pain, and you held on to them just in case. But holding on to opioids puts your family at risk. Learn more at www.fda.gov/drug disposal.
Technology can be challenging for business leaders, but Omni Strategic Technologies enables your business to perform without limits. They're the only IT company the Watchdog trusts. Omni offers IT managed services, cybersecurity and advisory solutions, backup and disaster recovery, and can handle all your hardware needs. If your business is faced with any technology challenges, the answer is simple. Call Omni Strategic Technologies at 304-242-7600 or visit them at www.omniperforms.com.
You've been putting back a few, and a few becomes a few too many. For a moment, you think of calling for a ride, but nah, you live nearby. What's the worst that could happen? You get pulled over, your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you total your car, you kill someone. The results of driving drunk are tragic. That's why law enforcement is out there looking for impaired drivers to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Drive sober or get pulled over. Paid for by NHTSA.
Summer is in full swing. If you think you're hot, well, so are your trees. You can help your trees by watering them, especially if they're newly planted. During the hot, dry summer months, your trees could use a water boost. Watering new trees a few times a week will help them survive while they're developing their root system, so don't forget about them. To find out more about watering trees or to find a certified arborist near you, go to treesforohio.org. That's trees, the number 4, ohio.org.
Hi, this is Hoppy Kercheval. Join me weekdays at 10:06, right after the Watchdog Morning Show with Howard Monroe for Statewide Talkline. I'll have guests, conversations, texts, phone calls, and all the big stories affecting West Virginia. So tune in weekdays right here on FM 98.1 and FM 97.7, The Watchdog.
Everybody's a dreamer, and everybody's a star, and everybody's in movies. It doesn't matter who you are. There are stars in every city, in every house and on every street. And if you walk down Hollywood Boulevard, their names are written in concrete.
And we're back with J.O.B., Jim O'Brien. A couple of quickies here, Jim. What happened to the ABA? I remember they had the fancy basketballs. They had great promotions. They had Rick Barry, Dr. J. What happened? Did somebody get too greedy, or you just couldn't compete with the NBA?
Well, it wasn't a matter of competing with the NBA. It was a matter that they just, one basketball player today, what's George's name?
Gervin?
No, not George Gervin. The one playing now, Paul George.
Paul George.
He makes more money or enough money in one game to bankroll an entire ABA operation for the year.
Whoa.
Okay? And basketball players today, of course, make so much money. But, you know, I heard your news flashes. If you have to give a bonus to people to get vaccinated against coronavirus 19, why not pay college athletes? I mean, it is just so crazy. They're having a problem right now on a national basis of they can't find workers. They can't find people to give jobs to at the biggest corporations in the country. I drove by a Taco Bell today that's offering a $1,000 bonus for you to sign up for a job there, and they pay you like $100 extra a month or something till you've completed your obligation. $1,000 to go to work at Taco Bell. And if someone said to me, well, what about the people who've been working at Taco Bell right along? What about the people that have been employed for a couple of years at Taco Bell and have come to work each day? What are they going to get a bonus? No. So it's kind of absurd. One of your news flashes, by the way, was about a couple of people in bad accidents on ATVs.
Mm-hmm.
Give you some advice. You'll never have an accident on an ATV if you never get on an ATV.
Okay.
When I was a kid, my mother told me that she never wanted to see me on a motorbike or a motorcycle. And that was one directive that she gave me that I actually adhered to for the rest of my life. It's one of the reasons I'm 78 and in good health, and after I'm talking to you, I'm going to go for a walk in the neighborhood. I got up at 5 o'clock this morning to write a story for a newspaper that I write for. Why? Because I enjoy writing. I wanted to do this story and get it in on time because the editor has to lay out the pages, and I thought I should get it to them on time. It's called responsibility. And I wrote a story today about golf, about I had met Rocco Mediate, and I just read a book about him by John Feinstein, who's one of the finest sports authors in the country.
John's great.
And Rocco Mediate, I didn't know it when I met him a couple years back in the company of Franco Harris of the Steelers. I knew he'd been a pro golfer, and I knew he was a pretty good golfer, but I had no idea how good, and I didn't know about his playoff with Tiger Woods at the U.S. Open at the same course, Pine, out in California and San Diego, Torrey Pines. I didn't know about the details of that until just recently when I picked up Feinstein's book and read about it. But this one that just was completed, it didn't have the star-studded field that I like, but I found myself rooting for John Rahm in a stretch run, and boy, he made two clutch birdies on the 17th and 18th to win by one stroke. And it was pretty high theater to see that. And it reminded me to write about Rocco and Franco. And I just got an email from Franco this morning telling me about what it was like to meet Rocco Mediate. And he said, if you meet somebody that has participated in a significant sports event, whether they won or lost, it gets your attention and your admiration. And he said he thought Rocco was great company and told great stories. And, of course, if you're a sports writer or a sports broadcaster, that's what you want, is somebody that's nice to you and tells you good stories.
Okay, you got 5 minutes.
Go ahead.
5 minutes to talk about Billy Conn losing to Joe Louis, got knocked out in the 13th.
Yeah, well, Billy Conn was an Irishman, and he blew that fight because he was ahead on the scorecards going into the 13th round. And instead of staying away from Louis, which he had done successfully most of the fight, he decided he had to knock him out because he wanted to show the guys over in East Liberty how tough he was. Seriously.
I know.
And he also wanted to show, he promised his mother, who was terminally ill, that he was going to knock out Joe Louis. And Louis had only been defeated by one boxer previous to his fight with Billy Conn, and that was the German Max Schmeling, whom he later beat in a rematch. So Billy Conn goes after Lewis and gets knocked out and loses the fight, and then they had a rematch years later after World War II and so forth, and it wasn't a very good fight. It was in the same month of June. I know you had some guests the other day talking about the fight on its anniversary. People in Pittsburgh got on trains and went up to New York to see that fight, and I'll tell you one thing that a lot of people don't know. This is never